My expectations for Dragon Quest Your Story were average, not too high and not too low either. I thought this film is gonna be just mildly entertaining. That is until I saw so many people in my social media talking about how terrible the ending for this film is. The ending of the film is so bad that whatever opinions you have for the film will absolutely spiral into the worst. Well, I did see the film, and not only that this film's ending is really bad, it actually has some really dark implications. And in order for me to explain why, this video is going to have spoilers. Dragon Quest Your Story is not really an adaptation of Dragon Quest V. It's a story about you. That's right, you, the gamers who have played Dragon Quest or pretty much any other video games in your life. So at least the title for the film is accurate for what it tries to represent. But the film doesn't disclose the fact that this film is about you immediately. The film tricks you into thinking that this is a straightforward, if incredibly rushed adaptation of Dragon Quest V. Only at the very end does the film show you that this is actually not an adaptation of the game at all. It's a representation of what you, the gamers in the audiences, think as you are playing Dragon Quest V or any other JRPGs in general. That's right, this film is trying to portray the mindset of the gamers who played RPGs. Except instead of being written by someone who actually plays RPGs, it's been written by someone who looks at people who plays RPGs and think, wow, these people who spend hundreds and hundreds of hours in this piece of software are just a bunch of losers. And that's how the film portrays you. The film portrays you as a reality-denying loser who thinks that the video game characters are real. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get into the ending as slowly as possible. And don't worry, I'll try not to spoil Dragon Quest V's overall story too much on this one. So after a big battle happening between the major heroes and villains in the story, the universe freezes for a moment and the big villain comes in. The big villain then reveals to the protagonist that all of the things that happens in the film are just programs. They're a piece of software with objects and entities dedicated for the entertainment of the users and should never be interpreted as something real. The big bad then decided to turn off a lot of the game's features like textures, gravity, collision detection, all to destroy the protagonist's illusion that this is a video game. And yes, by the way, the protagonist is revealed to be some guy who plays a VR version of Dragon Quest V in some VR machine. He's not really the hero of Dragon Quest V, he's just some dork who roleplays as the hero of Dragon Quest V, just like you people who roleplays as the hero of Dragon Quest V, because again, this is your story. Not this guy's story, but your story. This guy over here is supposed to represent you. So yes, going back to the big bad guy, he destroyed the protagonist's illusion that he's in the real world, and the protagonist scream in agony, telling the big bad to leave him and the other characters alone. Now if I got exposed to this phenomenon, I would open my VR goggles and say that the game just bugged out and tell the developers to fix it. But that's because I am aware that I'm in a video game. This VR machine is designed to be so immersive that it will temporarily wipe your memory before you enter. That's right, the VR machine will temporarily wipe your memory for that added immersion. So our main character screaming in agony is perfectly understandable because he truly believed that he is in that world and that he's alive and living with the characters. And this is where the dark and disturbing implications come in. This VR machine has the ability to wipe your memory, or at least to a small extent according to the film. But what would guarantee that this machine not be able to wipe your entire memory? What if this VR machine would make you to forget that you are living in the real world permanently? The funny thing is, this idea has been explored in heavens know how many fictional stories in the past. .hack.gu have explored this in great detail, even showing the consequences of what would happen if people got immersed too much in the virtual world and how it can affect the real world as well. Sword Art Online did this as well, except these two stories disclose the fact that the characters are in a virtual world early on. Unfortunately, film, You're not .hack. You haven't disclosed the fact that we're entering that kind of story. The film tricks us into believing that this is just a straightforward adaptation, but then it tries so hard to be meta and profound by pulling off a fourth wall break story, except the fourth wall break story was done so poorly that it became insulting, and even if it's not insulting, it's unoriginal. This has been done so many times before, including in video games, so its attempts on being profound ends up being really lame at best and really insulting at worst. But let's dive in more into that ending. Turns out that the big bad guy is a virus installed in the game. Not that virus, YouTube, please don't demonetize me. The virus then revealed that the character you are watching is not a character, but a player in the real world who has been so immersed with the virtual world he has completely lost any sense of reality, thanks to that VR machine just temporarily wiping out his memory, and somehow that's not an issue. The virus revealed that Dragon Quest V was a smash hit of a game in the universe, and that the game is remade in VR. Since the game is remade in VR, the player who played the game when he was a kid wanted to play the game again, but the virus berated him for being nostalgic. The virus also revealed that the player has only played the game for about a few hours, which can mean a couple of things. One, this VR machine is capable of slowing the player's consciousness by putting the player on a dreamlike state where time is significantly slowed down, kind of like Inception. Two, the player is so immersed inside the world that he has completely forgotten any sense of time. Or three, the game is actually pretty short, just like a lot of VR games. Actually, any of those points can be true, and it would have been a more interesting story than what we have right here. The player then asked the virus, why won't it just let the players to have fun and let them be? Maybe because you got so immersed with the game that you have completely lost any grasp of reality? Maybe because the VR temporarily wipes your memory and makes you to completely forget that you are inside a video game? But the virus answered with the most asinine answer. Turns out that the creator of the virus hates people who are immersed with the virtual world, and even calling them scum. The virus also revealed that the programmer told the protagonist directly, grow up, loser. So this virus could have been replaced by your nagging mom next room, and it would have had the same impact. After our protagonist is shocked by the utter stupidity of that motif, you and me both, the virus tried to bring the protagonist back into the real world, and this is where we found out why the art style is not very Dragon Quest-like. It's all because everything that happens in the game is merely the projection of our protagonist through the VR machine. So the virus is actually doing the protagonist a favor by offering him the red pill, but the protagonist chose the blue pill. And this is where we get an explanation and why the protagonist really loves to stay in this universe. The protagonist straight up admitted that he never thought that the game's world was fake. Even after he grew up, even after he recognized that it's all just a program, he said that the time that he spent with them was real. Therefore, they are a good substitute for your real world? Apparently yes, because he also said that the journey, the battle, and everyone he met throughout the way will always be on his heart. So you're saying that because these fictional characters resonate with you and connect with you on an emotional level, it's perfectly fine to deny your reality and embrace the illusion? This film somehow becomes a debate between accepting reality or embracing the fantasy world, as in red pill or blue pill. This is a discussion that is beyond this film's capability. This is a film about saving the world from the big evil, not an argument in favor of the blue pill, which this film is trying to be, by the way. Despite how evil the virus may seem, the virus is doing its best in trying to pull the protagonist back into reality, because that's the real world that he's supposed to be living in, instead of succumbing himself into the illusion of this video game. In a way, Dragon Quest V, the video game, is the real villain of this film. And this is where it's revealed that the slime companion that the character has been throughout the game is an antivirus that can kill the other virus. The antivirus then created a vaccine to symbolically destroy the virus, and oh, how convenient convenient it is that the antivirus is the Dragon Quest slime that is colored blue, which represents the protagonist's choice to stay in the fantasy world and never to be awakened to the real world that we have established to have existed. The dark part of the story comes in the ending, where the virus is defeated, the protagonist reunites with his companions, and one of his companion, which is actually his wife, hits him, and he says how it actually feels really painful, as in he legitimately feels the pain. So, what happens with the protagonist in the real world? Can he actually get out of that VR machine? Did he upload his consciousness into the digital world to the point where he can genuinely feel the pain that the digital characters give him? Did he do it willingly, or did the machine trick him into giving his own consciousness? Is Dragon Quest VR an experiment attempting to gather human consciousness disguised as a video game? The VR machine is capable to wipe his memories temporarily, which means that it might also be capable of wiping his memories in general, or modifying his subconscious in general. Is that supposed to represent what the Dragon Quest series or RPG games in general do to the general population, making them to embrace the fantasy world to escape from the sad and pathetic reality that they're living in, to the point where they suffer from a severe case of psychosis and dissonance? The film ends with many questions left hanging, but I'm gonna focus on the most important general questions that this film really needs to answer. 1. Why your story? The film is basically a simple children fantasy story, and that's no diss to Dragon Quest V. If the story works, I don't have an issue with it, but at least Dragon Quest V has 50 hours plus worth of gameplay. Your story has around 1 hour to 40 minutes at most, and trying to condense a JRPG story into just 1 hour and 40 minutes is like trying to condense a giant boulder into a small mouse hole. To the film's credit, it's not really that bad. Even with the awkwardly fast pacing, it does the job for being mildly entertaining. It's just the ending that totally ruins the film, which begs the question, why does this film need to have that ending? Why does this straightforward children fantasy film need to have a needlessly complicating fourth wall breaking ending? What is that ending trying to convey? What is the point of having this ending? I suppose the point of this ending is to celebrate video games and Dragon Quest in general, and if you want to have that point in this meta ending, fine. But then comes my next question. 2. Why Blue Pill? If this film is just about a straightforward fantasy story, the film could just be a mildly entertaining flick. But the film has to add that layer of complexity and fourth wall break into the story, just like the Lego movie, except not as clever or profound. And the worst part is that the film ends with the main character embracing the fantasy and taking the blue pill, rather than accepting that the world is fantasy, taking the red pill, and go back to reality. Again, it must be because whoever wrote this film don't really understand why people love RPGs or video games in general. People love RPGs because they immerse themselves into an entirely different world and allows them to roleplay as a character in that world to enjoy the world as that character. Keyword, role play, as in they are aware that they are playing a role in a video game, a role where they can do a lot of things, including going on adventures, befriending people, or even marrying them. I can assure you that 99.9% of people who play video games are aware that they are playing video games. They are playing video games as a means of temporarily escaping the real world. Keyword, temporarily, as in these people have to go back into the real world. Not everyone in this world is a hermit who stays in their room all day and not doing anything, although thanks to the current situation, everybody will probably be one. The question here is, why should you take the blue pill? Why is embracing the fantasy and ignoring the reality is a good thing? I personally think that the blue pill ending sends a really bad message overall. This film should have been less about reality versus virtual and more about loving video games in general. My red pill ending would probably go something like this. When the protagonist is revealed by the virus that these are all actually a video game, the protagonist should say, Yes, I know. And when the virus said, "You're a loser," the protagonist would say, "I don't care. I love playing video games, and nothing that you do will ever stop me from loving video games." It is much better if the protagonist realizes that what he's experiencing is a video game, and that it's perfectly fine if you love them. In fact, the villain would be easily defeated because the virus wants the protagonist to think that the protagonist is a loser for playing video games or indulging in nostalgia. It's much better if the film ends with the protagonist quitting the VR machine. He comes back home, glance over his cartridge of Dragon Quest V, and smile at the many happy memories that the video game makes before he goes back into the real world and do his real world activities. If the film wants to do a meta-narrative, that is a more heartfelt and more impactful ending in my opinion. But let's get into another point that I need to bring up. 3. Why Dragon Quest? The sad thing is, this could have been a really interesting and intriguing story. A story about a gamer who completely lost his sense of reality, a gamer who got trapped by the illusion of his own consciousness, and his journey in regrasping the real world is something that I want to see. I also do want to see a story where people embrace the fact that the fantasy world that they're playing in are in fact video games, and that there's nothing wrong with loving video games at all, no matter how old you are. Dragon Quest would have been a perfect fit for this idea, considering that this is a franchise that has spanned for many years. But that's only for the loving video game idea, and not the losing a sense of reality idea. I mean, do you seriously want to put a franchise with a simple story as Dragon Quest with the complexity and nuance of .hack? I'd rather play .hack than watching a Dragon Quest film pretending to be .hack.